Namaste and welcome to Indian History and Archaeology. I'm Dr. Lajwanti Shani, and our guest for today's session of Archaeo Talks is Latashri, also an alumni from Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute for Archaeology. We enjoyed hours of nerdy discussions in that place, and that's a memory we all carry with us. After college, she took a break for a while. I think almost all of us did that, really. We need that after years of academics. Latashri then got into freelance and still continues to accept short courses. She has developed syllabus related to archaeology and Indian history for short courses taught in undergrad colleges for non-humanities students. Currently, Latashri is guest faculty to postgraduate students at Azim Premji University. She is also interested in developing pedagogical methods for teaching history, something that I find interesting as well, and we're going to have a good discussion on this. Great to have you with us today, Latashri.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us, absolutely. I mean, IHA is still very young, and we are really looking forward to support from our friends. That's where it comes to, really. So I'm going to dive straight into what you've talked to me about, the work that you are doing, the work that you're interested in doing, pedagogy, methods you're developing for history. Tell me about that first.
Okay, to start off with, we have to actually inquire what is pedagogy. So pedagogy, I mean, in a very loose method of comprehension, is the skill of teaching. How to teach something. That's what pedagogy, is in a nutshell. And it is because of this particular skill that people who are, well, you can call them students or inquirers, philosophers, researchers, I don't know what you can call them, but the other person actually experiences change. And because of pedagogy, we have, like in primary school, we tend to remember things like, I remember I had a teacher who taught us verbs with rhymes. Okay. So I'm talking about sometimes the impact of pedagogy is that it creates memory and it creates deep memories, and can actually be, brought out at any point in our life, and this helps us in our analysis or criticism or even further research method. The impact of pedagogy is very, very high. It can offer an alternative, objectivity or subjectivity. And I even know cases where, because the teacher's pedagogy was good, people have opted to become, mathematicians or literature students or things like that. So basically, pedagogy can decide the future of an individual.
Yes.
And when we start looking at it for history, if you go, with the Indian tradition, even something like the Guru Shishya Parampara, which has existed, and depending on who your guru is and who you have decided who your guru is, who your teacher is, itself can change history itself. When people abide by one of the masters, not only is the life of the person altered, but we have seen that the Guru Shishya Parampara, how a country, how a nation's community, how a family behaves, and which is why the understanding of pedagogy is extremely important. What are the things that is actually impacting history can actually be, pedagogy. So it is with this kind of a background that when I started, working with history, I started inquiring into pedagogy. or say something?
So this is something I think it's really most important today, particularly. It's the need of the hour, maybe, where uh, school teaching to a large extent, even colleges also, has become very mechanical if you go to see really. A lot of the times, uh, people are just sort of racing to just complete a syllabus, nothing beyond that really. I mean, as a teacher, I have experienced that with the teachers as well as the students. I mean, their parents also coming through in the sense that why do you want to even go beyond that? What's the importance of history? I mean, how does it matter in the larger scheme of life? That sort of thing, really. And I think this is something really we need to develop really today, a kind of relationship, the Guru Shishya Parampara, as you said, also. So, and of course, to make that um impact on the student or the learner at whatever level that may be, where you actually carry forward these memories for life. I mean, I have these memories of teachers. I mean, I am what I am because of my teachers. That's how it is.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, right.
And that is why when we start really looking at pedagogy and the impact of history, when we look at history, it's kind of three things that is really happening. How is history being used on a daily basis? So there is one category of people. So Lajo, you know that I work with Chai with History, my forum for the public, right? So I'm actually interacting with a lot of non-history people. I mean, these are people who don't have an exam syllabus in history or anything. I've interacted with physics students and chemistry students, with the business and management students, and with Chai with History. In fact, I've interacted with lawyers, homemakers, with doctors, IT engineers, all sorts of people who come to study history. And for them, it's like a three-pronged approach that they have to history. One is there is a group of people who are on the quest for absolute truth, which means that a certain kind of pedagogy has to be developed. While they're working with history, what kind of absolute truth can emerge? The second group of people have this very misplaced reality of, it's a very solipsistic adventure, and that is, kind of associated with tourism. I kind of call it the dangers of selfie attitudes and official history. So having selfie attitude, and they think that they're having an adventure without even really understanding what an adventure in history can be. I mean, it's not about traveling some 400 kilometers to spend half day in Ajanta. I know people who have done that. They drive from Bangalore, where I live, and go all the way to Ajanta and spend half day, and they actually think that they have had an adventure. So this misplaced reality of solipsistic adventure and tourism is another query. We have to develop a pedagogy to kind of align them, that when they are traveling, this is their impact, and what else can they do. And the third one is the one which is probably very useful for school level kind of instruction and parents and things like that. So history has come down to being rote learning, right? I mean, you learn names and dates, and then an exam at the end, and it's quite annoying. It leads almost to the I think it leads to boredom. It's not even an almost. I remember in my history class getting absolutely bored, and it is
sorry, I'm interrupting you here. I mean, I found students to have this aversion for history really, and I used to tell them, I'm not going to ask you for dates. I don't want you to remember dates. This has nothing to do with dates at all. It has to do with events.
of the past,
Right.
and understanding and learning, relating to those past events, really, in the sense that how would you relate to an event if it was something that was happening today? So it's something that, you just sort of correlating really events as such. I mean, like what is happening around us today is going to be looked at as history in 50 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that is what I would get them to see, really, in the sense there were major events happening around us. This is what is going to be history, and they'd be like, oh my God, we're living through history now,
Absolutely.
especially
We're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, it's like the coolest thing, man.
Absolutely.
You're part of a book and the future.
Yeah.
But the
So
thing
how
is,
did
what
we begin with Chai with history? I mean, how did it all begin?
I'll just go back to, that boredom thing, and I'll you about Chai with history. Now, what happens with boredom is that one is an aversion is definitely happening, but what we are seeing as a larger community, and this is a wide phenomenon because we are so bored with the past currently that we are, as a society itself, are engaging in a very post-fact kind of an idealism and fantasy. So
Yes.
when I work with pedagogy for history, I find that these are the three main things that is kind of, there are three different groups of people. One who are looking for absolute truth. Then there is this whole solipsistic adventure that people are having, the whole selfie concept where, I have been somewhere and I know better. And then there is this boredom that has happened, which is leading to fantastic concepts of history, including our alien theory and things like that. So it is kind of a journey that I have undertaken for Chai with History. So Chai with History kind of started in 2010-ish or so, when Facebook kind of came to India. And, I started seeing that a lot of non-researchers were engaging in history, be it through Facebook groups, or even just very random comments and things like that. It was also the age of the propaganda that was happening about Indian culture and things like that. So there was a political motivation behind it, the official history, which generated an idealism and its own fantasies and things like that. Every party does that. So I mean, we're quite comfortable with it.
That's all fun.
I found it very fascinating to see how the non-academic person, as I would call the public, the community as a and these were all parents and grandparents eventually, which is why it is very important to engage with them also. It's not just the student syllabuses and things like that. It becomes very important to engage with parents and grandparents. I don't care who they are or what their backgrounds are and things like that, but I felt motivated that I should start speaking to these people. And it was mostly through Facebook that Chai with History actually started. Today, my largest forum is on Facebook, although we have made our roads into Instagram and Clubhouse. We're also planning to move into podcast and YouTube in a short while. But it was here that I started meeting retired engineers. I started meeting 24/7 working people, 9 to 5 working people, and they had some sort of an interest in history, and obviously they were gathering information that they had access to, है ना? और क्या करेंगे? So Devdutt Patnaik became the holy, I mean, what he said became the truth, simply because the book was available in the market. Yeah, I mean, I had people in the initial sessions where I was, teaching iconography and things like that in forums. They me about Devdutt Patnaik, and for God's sake, I had no clue who the man was. And I'm like, okay, can you do you have a book of his, because there's no way I'm going to buy a book, unless it's come with, really fascinating academic reviews. I absolutely refuse to buy a book. So they did the Patnaik, and I started laughing, I mean, it's a book without citations. It's a book without bibliography. It's a book where, you this very solipsistic person. There is one individual who is telling what he thinks, and
Right.
everybody is accepting it simply because, the
And
public
history.
has made it accessible. And I started reading through the book and said, how is he going to prove this? Because the goal is also for absolute truth. And I started bringing this kind of a dialogue and conversation where people can go beyond Devdutt Patnaik. I'm not negating Devdutt Patnaik. I'm not saying he's wrong. Everybody has the right to develop their own narrative. And so I showed them how Devdutt Patnaik has actually created his own narrative. And I told them that, if you can use this theory and this data set, you merge it together, you can generate your own narrative.
Yes.
You can do that. And that is precisely what Devdutt Patnaik has done in his works. So I told him you can actually move beyond Devdutt. If you're truly interested in iconography, if you're truly interested in mythology, and it's going to give you a kick. I said, because the kick factor is what is, that adrenaline of being a nerd. That's what I call it. It's you get an absolute kick when you're a nerd. Right? I don't know how many people who are listening to this are actually aware of it, but you actually get a kick when you're a nerd. And I started encouraging people to get that kick. I said, okay, Devdutt Patnaik has worked with these three concepts. Okay, I said, in the whole book, you just take these two concepts. Okay, instead of this particular method of analysis, interpretation, description, jo bhi unhone kiya hai, this different method. So I started introducing them to different kinds of theories that is available. Okay, so that's what Chaivid history does. I mean, it's not like a heritage. When I go to a temple walk, it's not a temple walk where I say this temple is from 1500, it is supposed to be blah, blah, blah. It's not something that I do. I just walk into the temple and I start with Kent Flannery's site catchment analysis. Okay. And I asked them, why do you think this temple has been built on this side of the street instead of that side of the street?
Okay.
Okay, and that's
something I was
really
about to ask you now, actually, is this like the heritage walks that we hear about from different cities also?
Yes. So this, of course, this is my regular temple walk in Chaivid history. When you come to a temple walk or a museum walk, they actually get bombarded by a very, very theoretical perspective. I mean, if you want the description, I just look at them and I say, you want the description, I'll give you the description. I mean, that is
would really,
which is
no
so
different
obvious.
from an ASI guide doing that. I mean, it's something where, okay, this is what it is, and this is what it is. This was built in this year by so and so king.
So names and dates. Names and dates. Sometimes I actually tell, people who have been coming regularly, I tell people to study the Wikipedia and the Google, whatever is there, and then come to my session. So, the inquiry can actually go beyond what is generally available. And for me, it is important that they enjoy history as much as I enjoy history. When I go to a historical site or when I have an artifact in my hand, I get a kick out of it, I mean, there are people who come and, who see me doing this and they're like, you're really enjoying your job, aren't you? I'm like, I absolutely enjoy my job. I love being heard. And that's what I keep pushing, are you excited when you are engaged with history? Are you excited? If you're excited, then you have truly attained an adoration of what, the Greek muse Historia, who is the basis of world history. She's a muse. And if you cannot with the muse, then then there is really no point in attending a history session or a class.
True.
Class, I think
This reminds me of during college time, not Deccan College, when I was in Mumbai, Xavier's. We used to go for these history tours across the country, and part of the honors program, a few of us would be given these assignments, or we would take them up, of course, on our own also, to do a study of whatever monument, whichever part of the history that we wanted to pick, and we would we would talk about it to our group, the rest of the history group over there. So I mean, it's like if I picked on one particular aspect of, let's say, the Taj Mahal, okay, and while we're there at the site, and I'm talking to my group, my not my classmates only, we were all 3 years or even all 5 years as such, so students from all the 5 years there, and I would be talking to them about the history, not just about the monument, so about the history of it, how and why, yes, the entire process of it, including the people behind it and everything to do with it as such. And we would have tourists coming and standing around us, like, listening to us over there. This happened to us even at Khajuraho, as a matter of fact, where the tour guide was, talking to the people around over there, taking them around. They actually ditched the guide and came with us.
That's happened. So when I do my temple work, I've had people who've come there to do puja, so this is a living temple. So rituals and everything going on. And there are people who have come the 21 rounds around the temple. And then suddenly they stop, can I join you? And I'm like, yes, please. Okay. Why not? I guess you need that. You need that connection to be built, and that can happen only when you are aware of the magic that data is. Today, especially in India, I mean, we are talking about big data and things like that. It's important for people to realize that it's not just the rows. The rows are telling you about names and the streets and dates and things like that, which must go into the columns. So yes, you can definitely interpret it right wing, left wing, all that is there, absolutely. But you also have to understand that there are, hundreds of other columns there by which the same things can be linked up with and a narrative can be built. I think it's very important for people to, increase those columns and give them names. There are plenty of names. Many people don't realize that other narratives can be developed. They're not aware of theory. That's so about contemporizing history, where students realize that they are living in the moment of history. When that thing happens, it's very, very exciting. And especially now, it's the age of selfie culture and everybody is talking about themselves. So there is a whole school of thought called I was just reading about it. A student of mine introduced me to it. It's called autoethnography, where when things are happening to me, whatever has happened to me, what I superimpose on the data, right? So a broken pot is probably a homemaker who's broken a glass jar. What kind of leave? What kind of fragments would it leave in a debris or in a mound in the actual location when it is being swept up? So this is autoethnography. I mean, you can actually learn much of history just looking at things that are happening in your house. And the thing is, you can actually start connecting to the emotion of that moment. I mean, what do you feel when your glass jar breaks? Ouch. Yes. Okay. And would that person, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, when that pot broke, can you imagine the emotion that happened? is how you can bring history alive. And we are talking selfie. I mean, selfie culture is everywhere today. Whatever you are doing, how would it kind of, make its way into the stratigraphy? How would it make its way into the mound? How would you document it in words? How would you make sure that that particular story of yours, how will you transfer it to the next generation? And then you back to history. Like, I have a whole course on Jataka tales, and in Chai with History, I run workshops on Jataka tales. And you just look at one Jataka story, and you can totally engage with it. You can totally engage with it. And I've had students who say, "Oh, poor fellow, the Buddha really had a challenge, didn't he?" From Buddha, he becomes Buddha, another person. He's a teacher who is trying to teach his students the kind of problems that, that poor teacher has had. They're all reflected in one or the other Jataka data. Of course, I work with the large corpus of the 547 stories that exist, not just Chitrakatha versions that's been selected. But so you can make this person very, very alive. You can even, when you do this auto-ethnography kind of processes where you contemporize data, where you kind of, superimpose it on yourself, you start understanding it and then say, oh, that explains why Buddha's philosophy actually says this. Because
Exactly.
it was the context, the historical context of his time is what generates any philosophy. If philosophy is solipsism, is existentialism, it's because the situations around us are like that. So any philosophy comes within its historical context. So it's not just about broken pottery. It's also about the great philosophies that have come into humanity, where you can constantly go back. You have to use theories, and I think more researchers should engage with the community, so and tell them that, ye theory bhi hai, thoda pad lena, and then you connect it with the data, and and this is what pedagogy is all about, where you give guidelines to people, to students, so that
but I find that if you tell people that there is a theory you should be reading, I don't find them taking that in as easily, as compared to like what you mentioned also, the ethnography as such.
Cool.
Yeah, which is something like the perceptions. I mean, it's each of us goes through life, develops perceptions. We have certain perceptions in life, and when you apply that, your own personal mental state or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So when you apply that to what happened in the past and you try to understand that person from your own perspective, and that is something that I've always tried to do with children. I mean, by children, I mean more of early teens, really. But of course, there are younger kids also. And of course, with schools, the good part was, not always, but you do sometimes get to do project work where you're actually sort of building a tableau.
Reconstruct. Yeah, you're reconstructing.
So when you're handling things, you're creating things, like say, for example, if you're doing Shivaji, the history of Shivaji and the guerrilla war that he would sort of engage in, and like, just imagine, I mean, we hear about guerrilla warfare now. This is what people do, hit and run kind of thing as such. And then think of it at that period, like, during that period, these guys running down from the hills, attack and run, like, what kind of weapons would they have? Like, children are engaged with weapons, of course. So
I've actually had students, I've given them, like when I teach, I have a course in miniature paintings. So I give them a painting and then I tell them that they should create a dialogue for it. They have generated full-fledged, theater quality plays. They come out to the classroom and perform. And even in these online classes, I had, these divided into groups of 5 and 5 faces popped up complete with the, they dressed themselves up and they performed the play.
So I'm going to ask you one more thing here. I had Jitu Mishra with me also a little while ago. And I'm going to ask you what you think of public archaeology, the role of public archaeology, and how do we take it further as well?
Right. So public archaeology would engage with also citizen research. One is stuff that I've been doing where, I engage with parents and grandparents. That's one way of, actually working with it, and it enhances their experience of traveling. I've had homemakers generate Facebook pages. Okay, so there is a very interesting blogging systems are developing. There are a couple of individuals who have started writing in newspapers. Okay. So so
aren't they then more like lay people without?
These are lay people. They are developing an interest. They're developing an interest in actually presenting their narrative to the public. Otherwise, it would have been stuck inside or within smaller groups of family and or something like that. But now they feel that they can actually present things outside, which I think is definitely good, because in history we have something called mysteries. So there are so many things that we don't understand. It's a mystery, mystery. When we go into, say, a temple site or something like that, there are iconographies, there are statuettes that we do not understand. But when we start involving more people to give their commentary on the temple, they start bringing their own family stories that is probably associated with an icon, which is not in one standard iconography book, and we have started solving these things. Also, I think public archaeology should support citizen science. And citizen science is where people themselves are coming together, and they start posting. So Chai with History has a project called Savira Gallu, where we are documenting memorial stones. So these are not standard Veeragallus with massive inscriptions and things like that, but more of the subaltern communities who may or may not have had access to the art of writing large inscriptions and decorative inscriptions. They may not even be rich enough to hire a sculptor and generate these things. So around Bangalore, have about Savira, that is 1,000 in our language here in Kannada. So Gallu is stones. So I've estimated through my initial surveys that there are at least about 1,000 stones. So we try to encourage people to tell us if there are any of these stones near their houses. Okay, and Bangalore is a very big city. We have a lot of people, and I found a couple of stones that we didn't know about. Guys, he's an IT engineer, and when he came to us, when he figured out that we are doing this, he was showing it to his dad, and his dad said, you remember the older, the rented house before where we were staying there is a little temple there with some 7 stones there, and we went. I mean, there's no way we would have found out, because it's not been documented in the gazetteers or these hitherto unpublished documented stones, and through these, and we found that the stones were secure. If it was not secure, we can even proceed further and ensure that these stones are protected, which is something that I did in elsewhere. So we'd gone to see some megaliths just outskirts of Bangalore, and we found a little stone. Now that road has already been sanctioned for widening, so this stone would definitely have been damaged. So we just looked at the just talk to it's a little village kind of a habitation there. So I asked them, can you just, so there was a government building just adjoining the road. So I said, can you just move it there and keep it? Just so it will be in the parameters of the village. It's not been completely removed. I told them to maintain the direction of the stone, because we don't know if these stones have more meaning and things like that. So so these are little things that we can tell. Otherwise, that stone would probably have been destroyed or buried, or we have no idea what could have happened to it.
It would have been recycled for anything else.
So this sort of a little tips and things like that, that I have been giving around, the people also have become very sensitive. So and actually Bangalore, we already have two very well established citizen projects that are one is affiliated to Azim Premji University, one is affiliated to Mythic Society. Both of them are documenting aspects of history and culture, and I find that people who come to Chai with History are also participating there, and vice versa. So there is some sort of a larger learning that has happened. So, but the whole thing completely depends on the accessibility. If researchers are available for comment or guidance, mentoring. So these are IT engineer types of, or HR types, who have developed in his some sort of a thing. We're having entire digitization projects of Bangalore's inscriptions, 3D modeling of Bangalore's inscriptions that have kind of, gradually
bringing their expertise to it.
Exactly. And then there is all this whole story of fund mobilizing, because the 3D painting, I mean, the 3D modeling costs a lot of money. And this gentleman, he was asking me, how do I mobilize the funds? Because he didn't want it in his personal account, obviously. I mean, there were a lot of people who would say, I'll give you your 500 rupees, I'll give you 1,000, I will give you 10,000, you're doing a great job. And he didn't want it his accounts, right? So gradually, so even I helped him also. I told him where he can go start an account. So he started with an NGO, some NGO that was affiliated with history. But then, the data is so big. The cloud computing that would be necessary would be very, very big, which means that, eventually government archives would have to support it. So, the project then shifted to Mythic Society, which has the required connections to archive, the digitally archive this kind of material. So I think we need to talk to each other. Yeah. And the more we talk to each other, people who are interested can actually, contribute to the history processes instead of just becoming, activist movement and nobody is doing anything. I mean, I think it's high time. If you think nobody is doing, you can go ahead and do it, and no problem. I mean, we all have our goals, but I am absolutely willing to help you get around it, or at least give you a basic guidelines as to, how it should be done and how it can join the government archives eventually, because eventually, everything has to join a larger archive. The real good work, I mean, new work that has happened, if you're going to hide it in some private www, it's going to get hidden away. It's going to, we don't know what's going to happen to Google. They're going to start charging for it or whatever. So eventually, I think everything should go to some sort of centralized repository, or at least an official repository. So I think this kind of an engagement is necessary. So public archaeology is with citizen scientists, and public archaeology is actually instructing people, you have to teach them how to read an academic journal.
That's the thing. I think we need to be bridging that gap, really, bringing the two together in the sense we are historians and archaeologists, and then we have other people who may not be trained like us to look at a certain evidence, but then they're looking at it from their perspective, which is equally important as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's a perfect marriage.
So I recall an incident, where, so I have these sessions where I take things like, the journal, like Man and Environment kind of journals. So I just take 5 of them, and we, at least before COVID, we used to sit on this park bench, okay, under a massive tree, in Cubbon Park, one of the larger lung spaces of Bangalore. So that is where we conduct Chai with History sessions.
Like Upanishads, really.
So I said today we're going to be discussing Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization, Indus Saraswati civilization, Chalcolithic civilization, because they need to learn these words as well, right?
Yes.
I mean, So I said, okay, we're going to do this session. So they all came. So about 10 to 15 people kind of, make it to these sessions most of the time. And I gave them the journals. And some of them knew how to read a journal. The English is actually quite difficult. It is not your Times of India kind of English in it. There is terminology that needs to be explained and everything. But eventually, when they kind of got the hang of it and they started reading, this gentleman, he's a financier, something like that. And he just looked at me and he said, Lata, this is science. Okay. And I'm like, yeah.
Of course it is.
But this is statistics. I'm like, yes. It's not. That is what I'm saying. People, because they've been bored by history, have indulged in fantasy.
Right.
So that, it is some magic story. Once upon a time, and he lived happily ever after. There is the great Voldemort who is a villain, and then there is some, hero Krishna who comes and solves all the problem. And history is not that. History,
mythology. That's what history is. Mythology. That's what it's been equated to, really.
Yeah,
But
totally.
I think a lot of it also really comes from the kind of textbooks that we've grown up with, really, in the sense that, I mean, I've had students coming up to me and saying, students or even my neighbor kids, really, like, bringing their textbooks and showing them to me. They're like, Auntie, look at this and tell me, how would I get interested in this subject?
Tell them the point is, you waken up your hypothalamus. You just have to remember, at your age, if you can remember, later on, you can, kind of bring it together. Because, I mean, it is beyond, what I find is that it is beyond me to change the syllabus. That is something that happens,
yes.
That is something that happens with the government, the lobbies, and everybody.
Right. No, if we just forget about the syllabus, when that gets corrected or doesn't get corrected, it's a different thing completely. So I think
it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, we could put forward the content, really. We putting it out over there. We, I think we can just be developing a narrative as we are doing in some ways.
So what I also try to help with, especially when I'm working with very young students. I teach postgrad, so it's much more easier out there. But when in the rare occasions where I have engaged with younger students, I literally tell them that the more you remember, your hypothalamus opens up. I take out a psychology drawing for memory and things like that, the amygdala and the hypothalamus. I say the more you put into it, the neurons and the synapse starts happening.
The more you use your brain, the better it gets.
Yeah, you're using your brain. And and the more you use your brain when you're young, the synapses, kind of increase. And the second thing is you can learn how to express yourself, or write beautiful.
Absolutely.
So there is a data set. You don't have to go searching for data, right? I mean, there is this words and names and numbers and all that sort, which has already been given. How beautifully can you write? So you as an
can you describe it? That's it.
Yeah, describe it. Yeah, describe it. Compare it if you can. I mean, maybe for high school or something. Can you compare it? So
the other level that I am particularly interested in is analyzing them. So if you're looking at events, if you're looking at people from the past who have, taken some actions or whatever it may be, even if it is somebody, going around building temples or building certain monuments around. If you're looking at that person's history also there, why and how did he go about doing it? It's not just, sort of rattling off, events and dates there that so-and-so built up that many stambas or whatever. Sorry. So it's also about why did he go about doing it? Where did he go? So what were the places like? What would the challenges have been like? You're analyzing it
You can
all.
actually teach Google mapping now with history.
Yes, yes.
How to use Google mapping, right? So
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
made these little things, little essays as to how to insert another location. Especially when we were working with this Saviragallu kind of thing, we started encouraging people to, mark it as a historical location on Bangalore's map. So we suddenly had this large increase of historical locations in Bangalore. And one of the other projects that has happened in Bangalore, they have actually done QR coded mapping things. So you can actually have a treasure hunt through Bangalore with this particular set of data. Very cute, very. It was all done by people, and mapping is something that high school students can do.
Absolutely.
They can traveling through the town if they can. I mean, take their mummy's phone. Of course, now everybody probably has a phone of their own, thanks to COVID. They can learn how to and make a solid mapping exercise. Computer science teacher can integrate with the humanities, or what is it called nowadays, social studies. They can integrate themselves and actually generate a nice project. So everybody can I think
many things actually
learn how to use the database.
Yes, I mean, people can take the data and do so much with it, really. There's so many things that they can do with. Like you said, I mean, somebody would be blogging. There are so many people that I've come across on Instagram. They come up with different kinds of things. Somebody who loves maps is creating maps with the history.
Oh yes,
very beautiful stuff as well. I mean,
there is stones. There is stones, also, especially when we work with monuments and sculpture and things like that. Hardly any prehistory is available in our textbooks. So, if you can go into the origins of the marble that makes Taj Mahal, or the antiquity of the Aravalis, I mean, the Aravalis are like the world's oldest stone, and it's literally one of the world's oldest stones, or like our Bangalore granite. It's actually part of the Pangaea, and in parts of this area, you can see the Pangaea popping up. You don't see it in Maharashtra. Yes. In Maharashtra, you have the Deccan
traps,
right? It's all trap. But but when you come south, when you really come south, I'm like, probably that I just point, I touch the rock and I say, this is a rock which has probably seen the first life form. It's actually dragons, dinosaurs walk on it. It's literally happened, and then they're all they're like that moment of I don't know, epiphany. It completely alters their relationship with. I say, next time you're walking on the tar road, which is made with local rock, inquire how it is. There is a whole mineralogy study that can be done. There is chemistry that can be taught through history. Just looking at the stone, you can learn how the molecules and atoms and the dimorphous rocks and whatever morphous rocks, all sorts of things happen. Yes. And I just love how the salt deposits start happening within the volcanic rock. Here we get only volcanic. So I show that, and I think the atoms kind of get heated up, and they all start moving out. This is chemistry. This is pure chemistry, and people are fond of.
We need a geologist coming on board as well. We need a geologist now.
Yeah, you can have so much fun with history. You can have so much practical fun with history, no matter what your textbook looks like. It's all about pedagogy. It's all about pedagogy. When you start up 2 or 3 subjects together, the king becomes a very interesting person. And the lives that he has led, the area where he is led.
Yes, it has to come out of school. That's the one thing, really. So I think we're going to end over here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great to you. Thank you very much for your invitation. Hope to see you guys soon then. Okay. Bye. Bye.
We will.
I hope you found this talk interesting and possibly had some takeaways from this as well. Please do let us know by clicking on the like button below this video, and do share your comments with us as well. That helps us to develop the right kind of content which you may find of interest. Thank you for staying with us through this video. Namaste.